Play. Okay. So I just wanted to thank everyone at the Providence Art Club, and especially Michael Rose, who set the whole thing up, and the gallery manager. And it's been wonderful working with the Providence Art Club. And I joined I think it was about 2 or 3 years, maybe 3 years ago. And it's really been a very nice organization to work for. So I'm thrilled to have this exhibition and to be able to share it with you. Let me just set up my picture, my thing. Okay, so okay, so this has to do with mostly farm subjects, because this is during most of the work was done during the COVID times. We had this past year, a little bit the year before, and you could still go out to these farms in Lincoln, which were really wonderful to work at, because it's just out in the open and with beautiful landscapes and animals to work from. I started as far back as I can remember. This is a drawing my father did of me, and the date indicates that I was 5 years old. But he did a lot of sketching, obviously, and I sketched with him also. Just out of college, I was, as you heard, studying zoology, and I got a job watching deer, assisting some deer research in Père David Deer in Virginia, just a summer traineeship. And while I was there, I sketched from the Jeep, and they saw me sketching and they saw my drawings. So I ended up illustrating the resulting book on deer behavior. And I just for a little background, this is one of my first illustration jobs was Dover coloring books of seashells of the world and tropical birds. But I took the opportunity to not just draw a shell on each page, but research it a little bit and look into the the behavior of these animals, because you just see the shell and you never really know much about what goes on down there under the ocean. So it was fun for me. I got to match do my art and study a little bit, research a little bit in zoology. It was a lot of fun. This is a snail, a type of snail that's eating another snail under the water, as an example. Often throughout my life, I was able to connect the two interests, which was nice. And so the very beginning, you'll see how my style has changed since then. This is an illustration for a wildflower book in pen and ink. And this is one called Birds on the Move. You see that it's very tight with a lot of detail. And so that's how I started out as an illustrator, pretty much. Got a little bit freer with these children's books. I did three of these for 7 to 10-year-olds using watercolor. These are Antarctic animals, and I was luckily I had residencies in Antarctica, which was absolutely a highlight of my life. And I actually got to sit there in these penguin colonies and next to the elephant seals and sketch and paint and everything else. It was just, the wildlife there is not afraid of people because they don't have land predators. So it was a real treat. Watercolor. So I'm going to talk about the two mediums that are in this show. That's really my main ones. Watercolor's the one that goes way back as far as I can remember. I love the medium. It's got a lot of luminosity to it, potential for luminosity because it's transparent and the paper shows through. So I was working at this one's Codman Farm in Lincoln, Massachusetts, and I just sit there, I'd set up and paint. The big old barn. It's just, and here now I also did some studio things there's one photograph I took that I really liked, and I was doing a lot of sketching of sheep at one point, also from the Gore estate in Waltham, which has sheep, quite a bit of sheep. So this was the one I did in the studio, just playing around and getting a little more abstract. You can see there are areas of abstraction in here. If you blew them up, they would just be, just kind of a mess. If you get really close to it, you see little sections that are just totally messy. And that's just because I wanted to free up, and I figured, I went to it with the attitude, well, I can just throw this in the trash. I'm just going to play around. But sometimes that attitude frees me up in the way I paint, which is fun. These were, this is a field watercolor. These were ducks that during this past summer, I had a garden in the community farms, community gardens at Codman Farm. And these set of ducks would just go into all the gardens and steal people's tomatoes, little tomatoes off the vine, and just rest in the shade under the sunflowers. They were just a riot to watch. So I'd sit down, when they sat down, I'd sit down and I painted them. And watercolor, I try to vary it. You can see in the foreground here, these sharp, just lines on the calligraphic kind of sharp edge things, and then soft edges over here where in the distance to show distance and mood. And you can see this is a little bit, all these sunflower plants in the background are a little bit suggested there. It's not totally defined, which is that's the direction I'm going. Another one, and I'd get all excited and I'd go back the next day, especially when the sun was coming through the leaves. It was really nice. But the nice thing about painting outside is the light changes. It's a little bit of a struggle. The light changes, so then it doesn't. Then you're limited in time. Before the whole thing looks different. The ducks get up and move around. So there's some tricky things about it, but I stopped figuring out, well, I'll finish it indoors because I just didn't get finished, but I didn't. I got it home and I said, what am I thinking? I like the sunflowers in the background are all not defined very well. It's a little bit abstracted, but I like the effect. It gives you the effect of the sunlight in a bunch of stalks with big leaves. And I'm glad I didn't go back into it, but that's been a struggle for me to, have this development where I just stop painting when it's time to stop painting. The other thing I love is sepia watercolors. That's nothing but one color of watercolor, and I happen to like that color because it's just a nice color. And I work with figures, and this is what introduced me to the art club. Was this figure session that Craig Marston was giving once a week. It was wonderful. So we'd go there just and paint for 3 hours, and I was working on this particular style of just using nothing but no pencil, just sepia watercolor. So it eliminated all the complications of color, and it was still a struggle, and I threw away most of mine because most of them were rejects. But when COVID came along, there were no more figure sessions anywhere, not just at Providence Art Club, but there were no indoor gatherings. So I decided to try to take that sepia watercolor medium and apply it to other subjects. And this is from that sheep. This was also an indoor one from that same pose that I really liked. And it's just different. You can take the same references and make something completely different. But again, I was trying to vary the contrasts, vary the values to get some contrast. And I do splatters and all different variety of stuff. And I try to leave things out, like, for example, the top of the head is not defined because then your eye can fill in a little bit. And I think paintings, to me, they're more interesting if the viewer has a little bit of interpretation to do. And that's what I strive for. I'm still a realist painter though. And this was, oh boy, I was painting a big sheep one time, and this was at in a barn. It was in a barn, and it was really big. It never crossed my mind why that belly was so round and big until the sheep's water broke, and I thought, oh my God, is it going to give birth? So I watched 5 babies come out, and I had to stop painting. It was an oil painting I was doing. I just had to stop because I was so, entranced, and I'd never seen this before. This happens with wildlife. I mean, wildlife and domestic animals. If you spend time with them, you get to see a lot of interesting things. Just another example of sepia watercolor and how I try to keep it simple, just a few washes, defining a shape. If you get the shape right in the first place, you don't have to go back in and do very much of anything, and varying the sharp edges with the soft edges and things like that. The other medium, which I started later in life, but I love it now also, it's just this blow up shows you one thing I love about it, which is the texture you can get. It's kind of sculptural and this is a chicken coop I painted out in the winter over at Drumlin Farm. That's part of the Audubon Society, one of their parks, which is farm related in Lincoln. And there were some chickens in it. It was the middle of winter. And I remember struggling and feeling like this is going to be no good. Just I was dropping things, and I was a little bit cold, which I'm usually not. Just everything was wrong. But I also felt like I was on a roll. And I think it's because I couldn't wait to finish and get home, I wanted to finish with it. And so I was going quickly, and I would put big brush strokes down. I take a big brush, and I didn't put too much detail. And that usually means I get better luck that way. Like back here, the woods, if I got up close and I looked at that, I'd think, what a mess that is. But I kind of like the effect, the variety back there. The the feeling of the woods without all the detail, and then just a lot of things I like about it. This you can see I just took a big brush and so it does more than just put the color on. It gives it a little texture. And then over here I noticed when I was making this PowerPoint, I blew it up and I said, hey, look, I put chickens roosting inside, but you can hardly tell until you blow it up. Well, I kind of like that. I was looking later and I rediscovered the chickens I painted and they kind of mimic the background a little bit, and they're hard to see, which I like that. I like having things that are obvious and other things less obvious in a painting. And trying to, this is all oil, but I use a lot of water soluble oils now. There are a couple companies that make great ones now. They're nice and fluid and buttery. Cobra is one of them. And I've gotten a couple Winsor Newton ones. They're much better than they used to be. So you don't need to use toxic solvents, and which I like. So anyway, I left. You can see it almost looks like watercolor over here. And then I did some things with palette knife to vary it, like these strokes of straw in the foreground and some thick paint here in the background. Just a little bit of variety, but I tried to keep it a little sketchy. This is a small one, another 6 by 8. Some of these are 6 inches by 8 inches, which is, I like small, especially for the field. And this, what was I going to say about that? Oh yes, this one was, you can see the little chickens as a coop here. So I sometimes get very detailed and sharp and contrasty where I want the attention to end up here, where the chickens are underneath that. And then a big broad foreground that's a little freer. Just play around with things. And then it's just, I don't figure it out. I don't actually intellectualize. I think painting is a process of when you really get into the flow of it, you feel it. You just look at something and you know what it needs, and you just, it's hard to describe, but it's wonderful when your brain stops trying to control things. Since there are a number of animals here, I'll just mention some of the challenges and just the process of animal painting. I decided to go one day, I was in the summer, to the Boston Common and paint the squirrels. So I brought some nuts with me. I had a bag of nuts in my lap. Well, they were more tame than I expected. And they started eating out of my hand, which I thought, oh, how wonderful. Until they started climbing into my lap and going after, here's one. I had to back up like this to get this photograph. He was in my lap sitting on my brush holder, and he looks like he's painting squirrels from his model over here. But that was a little bit getting too close, and I couldn't get rid of him. And I just had to get up, and I couldn't, you know, I was a little nervous. When he was wild, you know, I didn't want to get bitten and then have to get rabies shots. So that was a little too close for comfort. Here at Drumlin Farm, this is I pull over on the side of the street and paint from an angle that, this is an angle that the public doesn't see because I'm on the side of the street looking through the fence. This ram, this was so interesting. This is one, there was a white ram and a black ram in here. See, full of wool. And I painted this one. Then I went back, I was on a roll, so I thought, paint another one. I went back, they were both sheared. And the funny thing is they started fighting while I was watching, backing up and ramming each other. And I found out later that they didn't, from the farmer, that they didn't recognize each other. They were fine when they had wool on them, but once they were sheared, each one did not recognize the other. And so they were aggressive. And I'll show you what they were doing. The farmer was this, they had a lot of space. So they each back up about 20 feet, and then she's trying to distract them with food, but they don't want anything to do with it. Oh, and it's skipping a little bit. But you get the idea. See that he's running, and then they just ram each other. And they can really hurt each other. I even learned afterwards they have in the past can kill one of them through this. So you know what she did? She started putting fences in there until they were so close together that they couldn't back up. Once they couldn't back up, they stopped fighting, because that's how they know how to fight. Isn't that weird? So they sort of face off like this a little bit, and that's it. And and that was the solution. So it's really interesting, all this. This is early spring before the pasture's grown out, so they have to feed them hay, and just made nice, calm pastoral scenes out there. I love being there. That's, you know, a big part of it for me. It's just being there in the beautiful farmland and being surrounded by animals and fresh air, and it's peaceful to me. In May, there's a little window when you can find pigs lying in the sun, and they don't normally like to lie in the sun because they get too hot. But this is early spring, when the air is very cold, they enjoy the sun. So that was a treat, and I did a whole string of them. This is that same painting, only how I started it. I really like the way the contrast of the sunlight and the darks. So there was a strong contrast, and pigs have such interesting forms, you know, without a lot of fur to hide. A little bit more like figure drawing in that sense, that you can see the structure and the skin and everything. And they have interesting shapes. So this is another one. I paint the sheep, the pigs first, because I know they might get up. This is the tricky thing. First of all, I paint small. This is a 6x8. And then you can see what I did. I did them first. I didn't even go anywhere near here. I didn't even plan the painting. I saw them lie down and I thought, okay, I'm going to take this window of opportunity while they're posing for me. So I'll sketch it out as quickly as possible and then worry about this later. This is another one. Just shows my setup. I get on a roll and then I just want to go, all I want to do is go back and do another one. And so I'll do a whole slew of slew of paintings, and then I burn out and then I don't want to paint. I just have to do something, write or sketch, pencil or something. But it's funny how it works, the creative process. I wish it would be steady sometimes, but it's all over the place. It's always there though. I'm always drawing in one way or another. So this is the Gore estate. And this one, I was just getting into being really sketchy for fun. I just left it that way. I liked it and I just left it that way rather than going in and doing too much. But the interesting thing about these chickens, this is the thing when you're, you see chickens all the time, but you're usually driving by or you take a picture and leave or something. If you're painting, you're watching them closely for a long time. And one time they stopped, they sort of froze and they turned their heads, and they turned one eye to the sky. And I thought, what do you see that I don't see? Looked up in the sky, there was nothing. And there they were just frozen and watching. And so I really scanned the sky and I saw this, it was a very distant jet that you couldn't hear, no sound at all. And it was very distant. I could just make out the shape of it. And they are sensitive to anything that might look like a hawk up there. And they perceived it. I never would have known that was up there. Even when I looked up, I couldn't. It's so interesting to see how differently we perceive the world, And so it's just constant little discoveries and joys of watching these, of being there for hours, focusing on something. This is another one I did in the spring. I just love the seasons, the end of more than summer. I like this kind of distant landscape without the leaves on the trees, where colors just blend into the sky. The process of painting animals in the field can be interesting. They come up. So these ducks got up after I had drawn them, and they came up and started pecking around in my palette and biting the brushes and all that. It's kind of amusing. They're quite characters. And then this guy seemed to enjoy the yellow paint. I must have been hungry. little centipede there. A word about the seasons. This is springtime. I'm not kidding. It was springtime, but that's spring in Antarctica. That's what spring looks like in Antarctica. And this is the little field camp where I stayed for a couple of months. Loved it. There was a writer there, so you had to be two people in the field. She was writing a book that was unrelated to my project, so it was just great. Go out and explore from there. This is frozen ocean. It's 6 feet thick. 6 feet thick of ice, which would be melted in another month or two. So anyway, that's spring. But when it warmed up to -20 Fahrenheit, I could sit still and draw with a pencil with a big fat glove on. These seals that came up out of the. But my point is, I learned, it was through this experience that I learned how to paint in the cold weather. And I learned that it was just a question of gear. It's not, I'm somebody who gets cold like anybody else. So it's a question of what you wear. So I came back, and ever since I've been very comfortable going out in the winter, it's a blessing. Anybody can do it with the right gear. And, it's a blessing because there's nothing like snow for painting. Look at the way the sunlight goes through the trees in the woods there. It's so interesting. You got the verticals of the trees and then the slanted sunlight. You've got a low sun in the summer and beautiful snow shadows and things. It's like and then some overcast days I like in the winter too. They're very calm and peaceful, and it's just a great place to spend a couple hours out there. And you can see through trees too. You see even in the city too, it's nice because you can see right through the trees and things that are hidden in the summertime. And the ends of the seasons. You've seen this one because this is the raking light of fall, and the leaves are gone and the sun is low. And so you don't, in the summer, you've got a lot of overhead light and lots of green. So it's the other 3 seasons that I like the most. Recently, I've been doing a little bit of this. You see the thumbnail sketch, which is just 1 by 2 inches here, a tiny thing. And with that, I work out the darks and lights and the composition. So I can adjust it there where it's easily adjusted in pencil before I do the watercolor. And I find it helpful. I don't do that all the time, but I've just tried it recently. And sometimes I just find it helpful, and I know I'm going to end up with I know what kind of composition it'll end up with, rather than just winging it and then, having to adjust things. This is not a value sketch. I mean, instead of doing a pencil value sketch, these are just sketches. I do with oil, I do the value sketch right on the canvas with burnt sienna, water soluble paint. So then I can adjust that quite easily. You can lighten things and darken things at that stage. This is nothing but sketches of the sheep, because you can see the sheep is still there. But when I start this, I'm thinking, what if that sheep gets up? I really want to put it there. So I do what I can do quickly, which is a pencil sketch of it first. And then I have this reference. If the sheep decides to get up, I can still put it in from this reference. So that's how I work with animals. Sometimes it's work, sometimes it's frustrating. And I also do a lot of just sketching because it ends up in your memory. It's kind of you get to know the animal that way, and some of it sinks in and it ends up in your memory. So you can, the shape of an ear of a sheep, after you've drawn a whole bunch of them, and the shape of the head and how it fits into all of that. So I do a lot of this, and sometimes when I've had enough of painting, I'll just do sketching, which for me is easier and freer, and it just, I don't have to get on a roll, and it's hard to describe, but it doesn't matter to me if I mess up. It's just I have a different attitude when I'm sketching a little bit. I just doing it for fun, and it is fun, and it's satisfying. And then cows, I never understood how to do how their heads, the shape of their heads and how the snout is. And I even noticed in this sketch, I even put a little square here. It was to show myself the angle of in that position of the head, the angle of the nose, which tends to be flatter on the front. Just playing around. This was a toad. Okay, and I used to travel somewhat before COVID. So this was a toad that I found in my shower on a little riverboat in the Amazon. It was a small little boat, but since we weren't on land, I couldn't let the toad go right away. So I put it in a little bag with holes and painted it as it investigated where it might be able to get out of the bag. And then when we hit land, I let it go. But I try to I take every opportunity I can to, to me, it's a treasure to find a toad in my shower. It's a rarity to get that close. Now this is a captive ocelot in the same area behind where I was staying. There were a few cages and whether you like zoos or not, it's an opportunity. When I see it, I grab the opportunity. It wasn't really a zoo, but it was a small thing I just thought if I'm out in the woods later sometime and I see one of these, then I'll have some sense of the form of it, and I might be able to sketch it better than if I didn't do this preliminary, you know. And so I keep travel journals and I just write notes, and it's a good reference too for later painting. You never know how it's going to come in handy, as well as it being a really pleasurable thing to do and to look back on years later. But COVID, of course, stopped travel, but it also gave me extra time to explore the wonderful landscape and animals that are right here at home that I probably would not have spent so much time in without it. So it was wonderful. It was wonderful aspect of this horrible year, you know. I mean horrible year. I mean in the sense of what COVID did to the whole world. I was one of the lucky ones that got to keep painting and enjoyed that aspect of that year. So that's it in a nutshell, and be happy to answer any questions you have.
That was great. Thank you so much, Lucia.
You're welcome.
If you have a question, you'd like to put it in the chat, I'll be happy to read it for you so everyone can hear it. If you want to put it in the chat. I can ask a question to start while people are adding their questions to the chat. So are most of these being done, you mentioned a couple different like Audubon run farm areas. Are all of these being done in publicly accessible farms, or are any of them being done in sort of private property farms?
No, they were all public. And I can list the three of them that one is, two of them are in Lincoln. This Drumlin Farm, which is the one that's Audubon. It's an Audubon park. There is Codman Farm, which is a community Lincoln. It's open to the public. They have a little shop where they sell things they grow and also meat that they grow. They have a freezer there too. They just, and they have community gardens. It's a wonderful working farm in Lincoln. And the other is the Gore Estate, which is not even known as, I don't think it's famous as a farm, but they have annual sheep shearing events and all kinds of events. And they keep their farm. The nice thing about the Gore Estate, which is in Waltham, is they keep the historic part of it intact. So you can go there and you see the old, that's the one I did to the chickens there. You just see the old style of barns, and that's kind of nice. Some of the working farms, and sometimes a working farm can become more, you know, modern, have modern equipment that, and anyway, it's a combination of things.
Great. Well, thank you. One question from, first there's a comment from Joan who said, thank you for your commentary. So enjoyable and informative. Carrie Nixon said, Lucia, what is your typical oil palette?
Oh, okay. I vary it for one thing, but I do have typical colors. I vary it. I have even sometimes used when I feel like using limited color, which I do sometimes, I use the Zorn palette, which you know what that is, but for the others, I mean, it's just what is it? Black, white, yellow ochre, and red, and a red. Zorn, the artist, painted with it. You can do everything with that. And the black actually looks takes on the blues. Anyway, but normally I use ultramarine blue, French ultramarine, cobalt blue. I often don't put any green on, but if there's something, I'm going to paint something like what we're looking at here, and there's a lot of, I'll put on a, what's the name? One of the really earthy greens. Greenish umber, it's called. There's one called greenish umber and that's really a very brownish earthy green. And sometimes I'll just, it's very transparent. I love that color. So I'll just put an underpainting of a lot of that, and some of it just stays. And then let's see, then you go to yellows. I put a cool and a warm yellow, cadmium and lemon yellow usually. And then I put and alizarin crimson or permanent rose, one or the other. That's my sort of cool red, and then usually cadmium red, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, which is the one I also use always as my underpainting. I just like what it holds, the effect it has, the warming effect it has on it. Sometimes burnt umber as well, and then black. And I have black on there, which some people use and some people don't. And white, of course, titanium white.
Thank you. I think it's so funny sometimes when I think if a non-art person like walked into this room in the middle of this and they hear someone just like reciting the different, all of us are like, oh, interesting. Okay, now I can see that in here. And but it's sort of interesting doing these art talks. Joshua W. asked, who are some of your favorite artists from history?
Oh, well, first ones that come to my absolute favorite is John Singer Sargent, of course. and I like Zorn. But Singer, the funny thing about Sargent is he's so good at he's a master at watercolor and oil. I mean, usually people are better at one than the other. He's just so great at everything. He's free, and he's it's hard to even just, there's a freedom to the way he paints. It's just striking, everything he does. And then Homer, I like Homer. Those are the main ones that come to mind right away.
Great. Sean Kenny said, gorgeous work. Thank you for sharing. Joan pointed out that Zorn painted Isabel Stewart Gardner. So that's fun. I mean, I think at the Gardner Museum, they also have prints by Zorn, and he was a great printmaker too. He made interesting prints. Nancy Gosher Thomas added, we've come a long way from when we were at Spring Bowl Gallery. I've always admired your work, particularly those paintings of the Antarctic. Loved hearing your process and happy to see you at the art club. And of course, Nancy Gosher Thomas says, would you consider teaching a watercolor class at the art club? That's her question.
Oh, okay. Maybe yes. It's something I can't immediately have to think about my whole schedule and situation right now, but for the future, yes, sometime I'd be happy to do something, but I can't, maybe not right this part of this year.
Yeah.
It's hard to answer in full, right? We can talk about that, but
yeah,
well, in the future, I'd love to.
Cool. Does anyone else have questions that you'd like to put in the chat? Because I have a couple more that I could ask on behalf of the group. Okay. You mentioned, or you showed the sketch by your father at the beginning. Were either of your parents artists, or do you have any other art people in your family that inspired you or worked with you at all?
Oh, yes, all up the generations on my father's side. Both my parents painted. My father started out teaching studio, and then he specialized in teaching art history, but he used to teach studio. And we used to go to the zoo together and draw animals, which I loved. It's one of my favorite childhood memories. We both filled folders full of sketches. Mm-hmm. And let's see, my mother was really good at watercolor. She was very free with it too. Let's see, they both met at RISD. But my father's mother was a really good portrait painter. She did pastel portraits professionally in France. She was from France, and then here in the US. And then her father did amazing paintings. And that's as far back as I know. I mean, that's my great grandfather. We have some. I grew up in a house just full of paintings.
Wow,
from all these. Yeah.
Very cool. Mary Ruth put in the chat that she really likes the sepia sheep. She said that they really knock her out, and she was asking if those are in the current show. And yes, we have a number of those in the current show, Mary. And did you want to talk any more about another question I had regarding the sepia sheep was, for those ones, were you working from photographs on those ones? And if you're working from photographs, do you manipulate the photograph before you work in sepia? Like, do you transition it to black and white, or do you work from a colored photograph, or what's that process like?
No, no, I don't manipulate anything. I mean, it was color. It was what that was a phase when the weather was really crummy, and I was in a studio working. I had this idea. I thought, well, I miss figure drawing, you know, but I wonder if I could just take that style that I was using in sepia and try a different subject. And so that's what I did with the photos. And I don't manipulate anything. It's just so different from the reference that I'm looking at, because I'm just throwing, I'm either throwing the paint on and abstracting the shapes a little bit, you know, keeping it representational, but finding ways to just I'm not copying anything. You know, just look at an area and just start. It's hard to describe because it's not my head. It doesn't come from my brain. I'm there just doing it. But then I also, it's a question of simplification, because that style is really much simplified, but you have to choose. There's so many details in photographs that you just don't, you have to ignore all of that and choose what you want to emphasize and what's important and what isn't. And it's also a question of evaluating it as you do it. What does this need? You know, start putting things on, and then you go, well, I like this area, I'm not going to touch it. But I don't quite understand what's going on over here, or, you know, whatever. It's a question of constantly balancing as you progress. And then once it looks balanced, you're finished.
That's great. Well, that's good. That's a very insightful comment. And the portrait of the head-on portrait of the sheep that you were sharing, that's the one that in Bill Lane's watercolor class, he was showing his class that one because he thought that was a really good example, especially of thinking of value. And when you're doing it in one tone, it really gives you a sense of those values in an interesting way, I think. Joan McConaughey added to the chat and said, she said, very interesting talk. Loved hearing about the story of your process. Great job. Robert posted in the chat and said, do you prepare your palette prior to arrival at the site, or do you prep it on the fly?
Okay, the palette, I usually do it on the fly when I, excuse me, when I open the pochade box, which you can see right there. I usually take the paints out and put them on fresh because I'm not in a hurry. But sometimes in the winter, I like to have warm paints. I don't want them stiff because the cold can make them stiff. So I have it all indoors. And I learned this from painting with some winter painters up in northern Vermont one February years ago. I saw them do, they'd actually whip up the white. The white is something that you mix with a lot of things, and you can put oil. You have to often have to put a little linseed oil or something to make it less stiff anyway, back in the old days. Now they make them nice, really buttery coming out of the tube, I'm finding, the new ones, or at least the ones I use, Rembrandt brand. But they'd actually whip up the white indoors, and then they'd prepare the whole palette indoors. And I've adopted that, some of that, for winter, if I know it's going to be cold out. First of all, then you can just, you don't waste time, you can just start in. But also everything's warmer that way.
That's great. And speaking of painting in cold areas, Joshua W. posted in the chat and said, do you think that you'll return to the polar regions to paint again someday?
Oh, I'd love to. It's not in the plans because the way I got there was through, well, I had a few ways to get there, but my best trips when I got to stay there for months was through the National Science Foundation Artists and Writers Program, which is a wonderful program, but you have to have a project, you know, all ready to go to even apply for it. Those were the best experiences I've ever had down there, and I almost can say in my lifetime. It was amazing. And then after that, I had jobs being artist in residence on some cruise ships, some smaller cruise ship type situations. And that was wonderful because I saw it from a different angle, and I could kind of relive seeing the place for the first time, relive through the travelers who were, just, they'd see an iceberg, the blue coming out of an iceberg, and oh my God, they get so excited. And I remember I had seen so many icebergs by then, but I remember that feeling. So it was kind of interesting to see it through novel eyes, and just to have that different perspective. And we also, cruise ships go where things are interesting and beautiful, whereas research ships, which is what I used before with scientists, they don't, you don't deviate because you see a whale, and you say, oh, let's go look at those killer whales. But a big, a cruise ship will do something like that. It's really interesting, the difference. So anyway, what was the the question was, am I going to go back down? I would, if the opportunity comes up. I do it in a second, but I went down many, many times, especially once I got onto the cruise ship. So the world is big, and I'm also really interested in seeing some places in the world I've never seen before. So it's hard to say if I will get to where if it will happen or not. Then I went to the Arctic with little ship jobs, and then I loved the parts of the Arctic and went back on my own to paint there without having to just stop and look at something for 4 hours and then get on the ship and go to the next place. So that was good. So yes, I want to travel again. Not sure exactly where it's going to be.
What are the other places that you have in mind that you'd like to go that you haven't been yet?
Well, recently, I've never been to Nepal. I've never been to that whole part, India, Nepal, and the East. I mean, I was once in Japan for 3 months, but it's different. It's very different from the rest of the mainland. And that's something I'd be interested in doing. I spent a lot of time in Latin America already because that's on the way to the Antarctic Peninsula. So traveled through there, and I often stopped and traveled a little bit on the way up, the way back. But that whole eastern area I haven't seen.
Robert asked in the chat, how many times did you visit the Arctic and the Antarctic?
I don't even know. It's well, the 3 big trips, the NSF trips were 3 big ones. Those were that was those 3. I was 10 months total. I spent living there in different parts of the Antarctic at stations or that field camp I showed you. The cruise ship, I think I did it for, I don't know, 6 or 8 years, and each year we did 5 cruises from South America down, a 2-week cruise to Antarctica, come back, drop people off, pick up new people, and go down and spend I think 8 days or something, come back and forth. And I did that for several years because it was a great job. And then I mean, if you counted all those cruises, I don't know what it would come to. I never did count them. And the Arctic, I did 2 or 3, I think 2 or 3 of those cruise artists in residence on a cruise ship where I'd be teaching watercolor classes on days when we didn't go ashore, and also painting. I exhibited on board. I then did a little bit of illustration of the chart. I had to illustrate the chart for auction for charity, things like that, and then and painting on shore. And I even did a little journal book that was going to be published, so going to be printed and sold to the passengers. All kinds of ideas came up from creative cruise directors. So I did I did 2 or 3 of those, and then I went back on my own to paint in Greenland and to paint in Svalbard.
Oh, that's so cool. I had no idea that they did artist residencies on cruise ships like that. That's such a neat way to see different places and to teach people watercolor on a cruise too. That's cool. That's really fun.
Oh, it's great. You gotta, kind of have a captive audience. They're interested in things. That's why they would even go, to these kind of extreme places. And they like it, they enjoy it, so that's good.
Very cool. Does anyone else have any questions that you'd like to add to the chat as we get towards sort of we're just a couple minutes away from 7. So if you have any last questions that you wanted to put in before we finish up. I thought that was really fascinating. Thank you so much, Lucia, for sharing that with us. Your all the process and everything is so fascinating. I would also say, I don't know if Brian from Artscope is still in the list here, but I would say there's a really nice article in Artscope magazine about Lucia, and we have that linked on our website. It's also on Artscope's website. If you just look up Lucia's name in Artscope, I'm sure it'll come up right away. And I do have a few hard copies of that left. So if you wanted a hard copy, you could let me know, and I have some left at the club. But that's another great way to learn more about this specific project. So thank you to Artscope for that great article and for sharing Lucia's show and for sharing this talk as well. Robert had one more question, which was, what advice would you give to graduating art students?
Not to give up, because there's, it takes, I think I would say not to give up, because it just, there are times when it's discouraging, especially if you're, if you want to make a living at it, you can do it. There's so many different directions you can go in art, painting, teaching, illustration, whatever, you find your own. But it just takes persistence, and it's a wonderful thing. It gives it a lot of freedom. There's a lot of freedom and interest in it, but it's not an easy thing you have to have a lot of self-motivation. So if you have that, you should be fine.
That's good advice. And then my last question would be, what are you working on next that you're excited about?
Right now I'm doing paintings. I'm going to expand, hopefully after COVID. I've been doing paintings of still life objects too, shells and things like that, some nature objects indoors, and I'm still doing landscapes. I like to do also Beacon Hill area, because the street scenes, it reminds me of Europe. It makes me feel like I'm in Europe a little bit, standing there on these. So I make these for galleries, and I'm still doing that right now because of COVID. COVID prevents me from doing a lot of some of the things that involve travel, but I'm picking up journaling as well. I showed you that travel journal at the end. That's interesting me. I don't know if it's because I'm looking ahead to going places or what's causing it, but I'm getting more interested again in journaling and travel journaling with drawing, and just I just always enjoy that. So I don't know. I'm not sure yet, but I can't make big plans. This is just a year when things are different, and you can't make big plans because you don't know what's going to happen when, and you can't, so my life changed very much from this virus, and ended up just hunkering down, and there was a good side to that, as I said, just realizing there's so much right here.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's a number of thank yous in the chat. A lot of people saying, thank you so much. Good job, Lucia. So it was a very interesting program. We did videotape it, so I will make the video available to you all in the next week or so, once I get it uploaded. Thank you again to Lucia, and Lucia's show is up through the 5th. If you'd like to come for a visit and you can't come during the gallery hours, which are 12 to 4 on weekdays, you can just email me at michael@providenceartclub.org, and I'd be very happy to set up a special time for you to come. I'm also always there in the mornings on weekdays too, so we can work that out. And again, plenty of room for social distancing, and we have parking and everything, so you're very welcome to visit. So thank you again, Lucia. Great job, and it's a beautiful, beautiful show at the Art Club.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you all for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice night. Thank you so much.